Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we got a great show for you with my co-host, David Null, Hawkeye Two Feathers. Thank you for being here with me.
And greetings and blessings to all, as normal. And we greet you with the love and the honor of the infinite Creator. And we do hope that that y'all are doing okay. So peace and love to all y'all, and we hope you enjoy our show. His show.
It's our show. It's all right. It's all good. Anyway,
I'm just along for the ride.
That's right. One of these days I'll have to be along for the ride on your show sometime. But anyway,
if I can never figure it out. Yeah.
Figure it out. Yeah. Okay. Well, I better get started, and I'll let you go do your thing, eh?
Oh no, go ahead. I'm going to listen in.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll just keep going. Tonight we're going to be talking about
keep going.
Minnesota Massacre, the Dakota Minnesota Massacre of 1862. And you say, what the heck is that? Well, there's more to it than just it was a massacre. It was the massacre. And in 1862, well, there's a lot to it. We're going to put this up. I'm trying to get all my stuff.
And that was about the same time as the Civil War, by the way.
It was during the Civil War, and that's what contributed to the massacre itself. Here we go. And there we go. Now, this is not the book that I read, but it is a book, the Dakota War of 1862, Minnesota's other Civil War. Well, what happened is that you have, as we all know, the Dakota Indians were actually from Minnesota, the western half of Minnesota. And you say, what? The Dakota Indians were from Minnesota? Yes. The Lakota Indians are from the plains, like North Dakota and South Dakota. But the Dakota Indians were from Minnesota and neighboring areas there of Minnesota, North Dakota, Iowa, all up and down the western half. The thing is Dakota means Indians of the woodland, and Lakota are the Indians of the plains. So that's kind of their difference. And there we go. Miss Amber. Dawn is in the house. Nina the Mystic. Thank you for joining us tonight. Let's see who else is Lucky Stone. He's probably at work listening. But happy Tuesday, everyone. He says. Well, anyway, thank you for all you being here, because we got a night full of fabulous stuff to talk about, which is very interesting, because I feel really bad that this war ever happened, and it wasn't caused because of the white man. It was because of the government. It basically boils down to the government. The government created the mess, and because they were at war with the South, they neglected everything else, and that's kind of how it all went down. Okay, so, and where did I get this information? I got this information from this old book I had. It's the Indian Horrors or Massacres by the Red Man. And of course, as I was paging through it, I come across this little story, and we're going to read through some of it, which has perked my attention to this whole thing. And it goes on. It says, in the past 300 years, and this book was from the 1800s, so of the uprising of the Sioux of Minnesota in the year 1862, being of one sense but an episode in the War of Rebellion. Now remember, during the time of the Civil War, they called it the War of the Rebellion. It was overshadowed by vaster events than the struggle, hence for this war. However, tragedy and awful thrilling interest, not only on account of the extent of the character of its leader and thug-like brutality of the Indians concerned in it, but also for many stories of the white captives. the personal portraits of Indians, and the final catastrophe in drama, namely the simultaneous execution by hanging of 38 Indians. The tribes engaged in the massacre were almost all of the Metaquacan, the Wampatu, and the Wahpeton and the Sisseton tribes of the South, or the Sioux or Dakota Indians. They formerly lived in the northeastern part of the Iowa and southwestern half of the state of Minnesota, the western portion of Wisconsin, and also in sections of Dakota. By various treaties, they had ceded portions after portion of their broad ancestral lands. And see, this is what got me is they roamed through Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa. They had a huge tract of land. And by making treaties and deals with the United States government, they gave up a little here and a little there. And pretty soon, they're down to almost nothing.
I'm wondering, because we've talked about this for the last 2 years. What mesmerized the Indians such that they would do it in the first place? I wonder if there was some kind of fear that said, if we give them some over there, maybe they'll just stay the heck over there, and that, guess what? But at times it seems like it was too easy,
Yeah.
And there's some trinkets and here's some beads, and and we'll give you, all the way to the Pacific. But hey, and who says that the tribes that signed had the right to sign on the treaties anyway?
Well, and see, that's what they did is there's lots of tribes, of the Sioux. Each one's a little village, and you got hundreds and hundreds of these villages. And so remember we talked about this, where they call it touching the pen, where,
right,
the Indian doesn't really understand it all, but they get, through interpretation of the interpreter, they get told what it says. And then by touching the pen, they've signed the document. And
I understand, but I was just curious, just the thought crossed my mind that, oh man, were they lied to, cheated, or was it that the interpreter got it wrong, or you know what I mean? So, but anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, but that's true. You got all these little tribes, and one tribe says, no, you can't take my land, but the other tribe says, yeah, I got a bunch over here. We don't use that valley, and another one says, oh yeah, we'll just move. We'll move. There's lots of room. We'll just move away, and you're going to give us, all these things for some land that we don't do anything with. They didn't understand that people were going to move there and fence it off and cut down the trees and build houses and towns and all that kind of good stuff. You know what I mean?
I do.
Okay, so as it goes, this is short because this is an old book, but the domains until the outbreak of 1862, from all that land we talked about, they had been reduced to a strip of land about 60 miles in width, lying along the Minnesota River and extending from near Fort Riley or Ridgely for 150 miles to Lake Traverse. The Metawankans and the Wahpetons dwelt below the Yellow Medicine River in what was known as the Lower Reservation, and the Wahpetons and the Sissetons occupied the part above the river called the Upper Reservation. For the supersedence of these wards of the nation, the delivery of their goods and ammunition, etc., 2 agencies were established. One 14 miles above Fort Ridgely and called the Lower or the Redwood Agency, and the other at the mouth of the Yellow Medicine, called the Upper or Yellow Medicine Agency. Now, you got to remember there's, so I did a little research on this, and there's about 7,000 Indians living in this strip of land that's 60 miles wide and 150 miles long, right? And they depend on deer, and by this time the buffalo are all gone from that area. They depend on deer and elk or whatever animals to hunt, right? Well, you got 7,000 people to feed. You've hunted the animals down till there's nothing, right? Now the government came in with these agencies and said, yeah, we took all your land and this is what's left, and we're going to give you things. We're going to give you money every year for umpteen years, and we're going to give you food, and we're going to give you money, and we're going to give you tools and help you to be farmers. Hey, Scotty boy. Oh yeah, Elderberry says this is a bad chapter in history. Yeah, it is. Okay, so as they go along, we'll get on with this, and it's called Farmer Indians. Now, the men at these agencies were trying to convince the Indians to be farmers and be like the white man. So the Indians that joined the church gave up their religion and became, Catholic or whatever it would be, Christian. I should just say Christian. And so you give up the barbarian ways and stuff like that, and you cut your hair and you send your kids to school and you dress in the white man's clothes and you live in their houses and you farm the land like they do. They became the farmer Indians, and they were the preferred Indian. Okay. As I've found out. Okay. And it says these Sioux lived some in houses of brick constructed by the government, some in circular wigwams of bark, and others in canvas teepees. Part of them, about 150 families, had been introduced to become farmer Indians. That is, they had their hair cut short, wore the dress of the whites, attended the churches and schools, and buried their dead, and were married by the clergymen. And remember, the original Indians didn't bury their dead. They still put them on, stilts and left them in a field. Whereas the new Indian had to bury their dead like the Christian people at the churches in the ground, right? And they elected a chief or a president instead of the chief becoming chief because he killed so many braves or something on battles. They would elect him like they do, a president. They were regarded with jealousy and contempt by the other Indians, for the government agents took pains to discriminate in the favor wherever it was possible. The majority, however, retained their usual customs. Now remember, this is 1862. Way back there, you're still shooting with black powder rifles, and the war is going on, and there's no cars and no electricity either. The other Indians, they had painted faces and feathered themselves and wore blankets and breech cloths and leggings and moccasins. They kept their hair long and uncombed, married as many wives as they pleased, and placed their dead on scaffolding in the open air as their fathers had done before them. With these Indians, the highest virtue was to kill men. The greatest hero was he who had the most feathers on his head, as tokens of the number of his murders. Notice how they say murders. Well, they're at war. That's what they did. They warred. The fireside talk of young braves was generally of their killing exploits, of their expeditions against their enemies, the Chippewas, and their individual feats of prowess. Upon the reservation, grouped around the agencies, were churches, schools, warehouses, stores, residences, shops. Near the Yellow Medicine River lived the missionaries, of course, the reverends, the Reverend Briggs, and Dr. Williamson. On Big Stone Lake, at the upper end of the reservation, were the other trading posts. At Lac Qui Parle was the dwelling house and the school of the missionaries. Reverend Mr. Huggins, together with a store and a blacksmith shop, belonged to the government. The reservation was well adapted to agriculture. A good road ran through it. Over the marshes and streams were numerous excellent bridges. Here were sawmills, corn mills, brickyards, blacksmith shops, and carpenter shops. About 3,000 acres were cultivated. At the time of the outbreak, large and valuable crops were ready to be gathered, and everything gave indications of prosperity. No one suspected danger, and the agent, Mr. Galbraith, was rejoicing in the bright prospects for the future. Well, what were the causes of the uprising? And this is where things go really bad. Sounds like they were doing really good. They're growing crops, they're being farmers, but that was only a small portion of the Indians. Remember, there's about 7,000 Indians living in that chunk of land, and there's only about 100 to 150 families that are actually being farmers. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
The other ones are still out there shooting deer and dwindling the populations and stuff like that.
And being Indian.
Being Indians, yes. You know, living the life. Okay, cause of the uprising. What then were the causes that led to the Indians to rise and murder their white neighbors and fellow townsmen? They were many and deep-seated, and first, maybe mentioned, and repugnance of the race. This instinctive enemy was increased by the extortions of the traders, who also debunked the Indian women and sold to the men the liquors that made wrecks of them. So remember, Indians, back in the day, when they would get liquor, they wouldn't take much, and they were totally drunk and wasted. They would literally drink themselves to death on a quart of liquor.
And to this day, though, there are many natives on the res who, you know, they're the same way. The native population has a horrible propensity for drinking any kind of alcohol.
Yes, that is absolutely true. Skyboy says firewater. Yes.
Yeah.
And exactly. Where do you think they get firewater from? But anyway, yeah, that was the thing. And as you notice in here, so I did a little research on this. It said the increase of extortions of the traders. So what happened is these agencies, the government agencies, were very corrupt, and they would get the supplies from the government and they would sell it to the white citizens, or they would give it portions of it to the Indian farmers. But the rest of the Indians, if you didn't conform in being a farmer Indian, you didn't get nothing. You didn't get any money, you didn't get any things, you just got gypped. And these agencies were so corrupt, they were selling the stuff and making money, and nobody was prosecuting. So, you know, it was really bad. And of course, now you're given, it's just like it is today, where, you know, the Indians get the liquor, drugs, you know, whatever, it affects them 10 times worse. And so they're not doing anything. Another
well, and not only that, and remember, it's just like it is today. Every 4 years, they got different people. So, you know, who used to be the guy, you know, last year may not be the same guy that's, you know, negotiating with you now. So, you know, there was a lot of that too, a lot of high turnover. And and of course the native folks, it's the same chief, you know, he's been there for 40 years, you know, and there's been 6 or 7 Indian agents, you know, so it's hard for them to understand that. And it's also hard for them to, you know, one guy says one thing and shakes hands and smokes the pipe, and the next thing you know, there's 2 or 3 more guys, and, you know, so they don't know where they stand. But so that's going on too, my friends.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Other grievances were the prohibition of their wars. So the white man just couldn't understand why the Indian had to make war on the other tribes, like the Ojibwas and the Chippewas and things like that. And the white man said, you know, going out and killing your other Indians, that's wrong. Don't do it. But, you know, so they put a prohibition on their wars among the Chippewas, which seemed to be tyrannical. I mean, can you imagine somebody coming down saying, no more, you can't fight with the neighbor over there. This is no, don't do it anymore. You're going to be mad. You're like, hey, that's what we do. You know,
that's right. It's sort of like count and coup.
Yes, no more count and coup. That's against the rules. You know, no more doing that. They, you know, of course, the white people said it was really remarked that it was illogical since the whites themselves were engaged in bloody war. You know, the Indians were thinking, you're at war with your own white people, but it's okay for us to war, but not for you guys. You know,
right?
So they couldn't. The Indians couldn't understand. They didn't understand why you were at war because you're at your war with your brothers of the South, and then deprive the Indians of the privilege of warfare. So they deprive them of that. So how are you going to be a brave if you got nobody to fight, right? Deprive the privilege of warfare, and they deem their chief glory departed, and have no more means by which to distinguish themselves in their judgment, that they are then no better than squaws. Yeah, because if you don't go to war, you don't need braves, and if you don't need braves,
you can't be a warrior. And
yeah.
May I also interject that in today's society, because I've known several Navajo men, and most of them join the Marines because that's the toughest, and that's how they can become a warrior in today's society. And like 90% of certain tribes, all of the men have served at least one term.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's how to be a warrior. But if you can't be a warrior, then you're just as good as a squaw.
Yeah.
Their hatred for the traders was further augmented by the knowledge that these were the men who had been instrumental in depriving them of their lands. These traders sold goods to the Indians on credit, knowing well that the government would sooner or later buy the land and expecting to receive their money when it was paid for. Possession, a knowledge of the Indian language, and having in their employ many half-breeds and relatives of the Indians. So the traders would give them stuff and trade with them, but they knew that they were going to get paid when the Indians sold more land. You know, what a good deal. Here, I'll give you a bunch of credit. When you sell that land, you got to give the money to me. So there you go. It's a real bad way to have them. So basically, you're going back in time with a credit card. Yeah.
Or the trader took over the land.
Either way, yeah. They were both persuaded them to sell their lands, and when the treaties were made and their services were required as interpreters, only agreed to act as such as persuaders of the Indians to the measure provided the indebtedness of the Indians to them should be paid out of the treaty money. See? Further, upon the payment of the annuities, after the execution of the treaties, it was the custom of these traders to arrange with the government for this deduction of their own bills for the amount. So before the Indians even get the amount of money, the traders take theirs first.
Yeah.
This course naturally exasperated the Indians. Their honesty was questioned. Call a map a thief and he may become one, or call a man a thief and he may become one. And so now it gets worse. This was building up to the war. More fraud and connivery. The claims for depredations on the white settlers were also taken from the annuities at Washington. They were frequently sporadic and absurdly exaggerated. Moreover, it was an injustice to punish the whole tribe on account of a thief of one man. It was often happened that the advantage occurred to the thief, since the value of his stolen property exceeded by far the deduction made in his share of the annuity. Other acts of fraud and connivery were also practiced. In addition to the appropriation of over $400,000 of the cash payment due to them under the treaties of 1851 and 1852 to the traders and old indebtedness, there was a sum of $55,000 that was given to the certain Hugh, this is one guy, Hugh Tyler, for his instrumentally in passing the treaties through to the Senate and for his necessity and expenses in gaining the agreement of the chiefs. So he got, you know how much $55,000 was worth in 1860s?
Oh yeah, bunches. He was that was where finder's fees came in.
Yeah, because he pushed it through to the Senate. Of course he did.
He negotiated the deal that we've got people in the Congress now who are, doing exactly that. So yeah, it hasn't changed in over 100 years. So
just one guy out of the 400,000 took 55,000 right off the top before anybody else got it. And it goes on. In 1857, they were defrauded out of $12,000 by a trader who induced them to sign certain papers. The same man who at another time secured $4,500 for goods, which he said had been stolen from his warehouse. So the Indians stole it. We're just going to deduct it off their payments. At this time of the massacre, the Indians had sold nearly all of their land and had received but a pinch of its value, their annuities amounting to only $15 a piece. So you mean we sold all our land and we got $15? Do the math, people. There's 7,000 Indians. Give them $15 a piece, and I don't know how much that comes out to, but it ain't that much. During the winter and spring preceding the massacre, they suffered severely from hunger, and some died of starvation. The Sissetons of Lake Traverse were obliged to eat their dogs and horses. This distress was in part due to the destruction of the crops by the ravages of a cutworm. So cutworms for crops is really bad. I know.
Really bad.
Yeah. We know what they can do. So you can have a nice big garden of cutworms come through and you got nothing. This dissatisfaction arising from all these causes was greatly enhanced by the failure of the government to make their payment that year in 1862. So not only did your crops fail, your kids are starving to death. There's no food. You sold all your land. And now because of the war, the government failed to make their payment at the usual time, which is June. And from their inability to obtain credit from the traders in consequence, they were informed that on account of the financial pressure on the government in those war days, it was doubtful if it could make more than a half a payment. Various foolish tales, here comes the stories now. Various foolish tales about the war of the rebellion were told to them by the half-breeds as the black people were about to take Washington, and that they would give the Indians nothing. The impression was given that the North was entirely exhausted and would soon be vanquished, since wherever they went in Minnesota, they saw only women and children and old men. Well, of course, all the young men went to war. And so now here's all the women and children, and they're being told that Washington is going to fall to the South. The South is winning. Washington can't make the payments. Sorry, buddy. Lies, 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 and more lies. Wow. Hey, that's just what they do today.
No, but in 1862, Lee had crossed the Potomac. And so at that time, it looked like the South was really making progress, and they were. But it didn't mean that they was going to win. That was the furthest that they went, I think was like 1863. But, in 1862, they had made some progress north. But the North rallied and pushed them south, and that's the end of that. But at the time, the Indians were right.
Yes.
At that time.
Oh yeah. Now, all these things provoked resentment, moreover, and they entertained a childish idea that they would receive help from the English. Old men remembered that the War of 1812, when they had taken a cannon from the Americans and presented it to the English, the latter had told them that they would keep it. And if they, the Sioux, were ever in danger, they should let them know, and they would send it to them with men to work it. The Sioux themselves could muster 1,300 warriors armed with double-barreled shotguns. They hoped also to enlist other tribes in the uprising so as to wholly drive out the whites from Minnesota. They boasted that they could camp in the streets of St. Paul. They relied upon assistance from the Winnebagos, the Chippewas, and the Yanktons, then the Yanktatusis, and the Tewan and the Sioux. In July, the Indians, to number of 5,000 belonging to the upper agency, came down to the government buildings by the Yellow Medicine River. That's a lot of Indians, 5,000 of them. Bet you that was a showing, wasn't it? Okay, they encamped there and saying, what?
I was going to say, now, imagine just back then, and all them folks got together, right?
Yeah.
So then they starts talking amongst themselves. Now, here they're getting information from Washington, D.C., that the South's kind of doing some stuff here. So they're thinking to themselves, we got these folks on the run.
That's right.
This
There's only
a
women,
really good chance.
Children and old men.
Because, and they're all getting together to have this war powwow. And so they're considering, like, they have pushed us all this way. Maybe it's time for us to go take some of that back the other direction, And if you were in war, you would say that the North had to protect their western flank, And so the native folks are getting together and they're going, they're probably talking and going, this might be a really good chance for us to take some of our property back. So just keep that in mind too. And I just wanted to interject that.
It's just too bad they didn't go ahead and, get a hold of the South there and say, hey, we want to fight up here and give us some weapons and stuff. We'll flank them for you,
Right. But in essence, that's about. Yeah, they might not have talked to the South, but I'll bet you, because the Indian warriors, they were smart,
They were.
And so they knew what was going on. So anyway, I me, I'm always interrupting with stuff.
Okay. Well, in July, the Indians, to number 5,000 belonging to the upper agency, came down to the government buildings by the Yellow Medicine River and encamped there, saying they feared that they would not receive their money. Of course, the creditors are at their door. They can't get anything because nobody will give them any money because, hey, the government doesn't have it. Well, they suffered extremely from hunger. They dug up roots and ate them, and the corn which was given them was devoured raw. They were really hungry. On the 4th of August, they broke into the government storehouse and with guns cocked and leveled at the presence of 100 soldiers, took out provisions. Finally, they were induced by an issue of a large quantity of stores and returned to their homes. So once they got food, they were pacified. That's what this thing is here is about, this picture. The indication of the Indian murders in Minnesota by the Boys Rather Than a Massacre. This is where they said, hey, go eat grass. We don't want you here. Go eat grass. Anyway, okay. The Indians at the lower reservation were even more threatening because they did not hunt so much and had come more in contact with the whites. About the 1st of July, they formed the Soldiers' Lodge, a secret organization of the tribe. whose object was to make head against the traders and prevent them from getting money from the annuity. So they knew the scam. There was a scam there, and they were going to get a little money, but the traders were just going to take it, and they weren't going to get nothing anyway. Okay, if that was unsuccessful, they were to drive them off or kill them. After the establishment of this lodge, when the Indian asked for credit, he was met with the reply, "Go to the soldiers' lodge and get credit," to which the Indian would angrily resort. "Yes, if I was your kept squaw, I could get all the credit I wanted. But since I'm a man, I cannot." So, wow, that was a stiff tongue for back in those days. Basically, they're not getting any credit for the food they need and the things they want. But, they're trying to make puns of all this because they're pissed. On Sunday.
Well, and they were promised. That's the big thing. All right, we signed a piece of paper. You said you were going to do it. And like I said a few minutes ago, all the Indian agents, they traded out all the time. So, it's like, every 6 months there's a new, Indian agent. So, and at the meantime, the North is, saying, no, that's all right. We're not going to spend any money. And now Lincoln's in there, and I don't know really what his feeling was about the natives, but he wasn't trying to support them.
No, he wasn't. He was not. He probably didn't even have a slightest idea what was going on much because of the fact that, he's got a war to fight. You got a few Indians on a reservation. I got Indian agents out there. We got two Indian store places out there. I'm sending them money. Why aren't things getting done? See, and that's why I said that.
I'm sorry. It's the same thing like it is today. One side wants to send $1 billion to the Ukraine, and and the other side going no. So a lot of that was congressional appropriations, and so if they had appropriated X amount of money the year before for the Indian nations, well, this year they go, well, you know how it is. We got to keep some of that money. We got to buy uniforms for our guys, and that's how that works.
Once they see, it's the same thing nowadays. Once they appropriate that money, they send the money out, and Congress forgets about it. They figure that it's going to these agencies, and we hired people there that's supposed to do what it's supposed to go for, right? Just like it is now. Hey, we gave them $1 billion, and they're supposed to buy stuff to fight the war, and yet you got the president of Ukraine guy buying houses and fancy cars, and you're going, how's he afford all this stuff, right? Well,
and Biden's son is getting kickbacks with the oil transfers and everything back then during the Obama days, and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of money being spent.
Basically, it's once they appropriate the money, Congress kind of forgets about it. They never follow up. And the same thing back then. Once they sent the money, Congress thought, hey, we gave the money to the Indians. They should be living high off the hog. Except by the time it trickled down to the Indians, they got $15 a piece.
Yep.
Okay, let me go on here. On Sunday, the 17th of August, a slight quarrel between 15 Indians served as a spark. You notice there's always one of those black swan events or something to set it all off.
A slight quarrel. Just think about those words, though. A slight quarrel. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Between 15 Indians served as a spark to set the whole powder train of dark passions in a flame. They were walking over the prairie near action when they came upon some hens, eggs in the grass, meaning some prairie hens or something. One
free-range chickens. Yep.
Yes, free-range wild chickens. Remember, there used to be a lot of those back in the day, but not so much now. One proposed in eating them. Another said that he must not touch them, for they were eggs of a tame fowl. Oh, maybe they weren't wild chicken. They were regular chickens from a farmer and belonged to the white man. The dispute waxed warm. The eggs were dashed to the ground by the man who had proposed to eat them. The other called him a coward. To disprove which assertion, the first one drew his bow and shot an ox. Ox is a cow. And an epic crowd was banned about, or rallied about, and finally they separated into two. So all over some chicken eggs. They were hungry. Remember, these Indians were hungry, and so
yeah, and they really did have oxen back then.
Yes. Yep. So they did that. The party saying that they would prove their bravery by killing white men. They waited an opportunity to carry out this resolve. Okay. So now they're pissed. They're hungry. The guy's fighting over, no, don't hurt the farmer's eggs. That's their chicken. That's their ox. Leave them alone. So you got the two sides. Other guys saying, I'm hungry. I got to feed my kids. Give me the damn eggs. Okay. Sudden attack.
Now there's a dead 9,000 or 900 pound to 1,200 pound piece of beef laying there on the ground.
That's right. That's right. Okay. 4 of them soon came to the house of a Mr. Robinson Jones, who, with his wife and a lady named Clara D. Wilson, were within. Okay, after a quarrel with Jones concerning a gun that one of them had borrowed but failed to return, they proceeded to the next house, that of Mr. Howard Baker and his wife. Mr. and Mr. Webster also being present, the Indians asked for water, which was given to them, then for tobacco, and they sat down to smoke. Presently, Jones, who was Barker's father-in-law, and his wife came over, and the quarrel about the gun was renewed. Mr. Baker and Mrs. Jones, if they had given, or Mrs. Baker asked Mrs. Jones if she had given them any whiskey. She replied, "No, we don't keep whiskey for such black devils as these." The Indians seemed to understand the conversation, and they looked back and threatening. After some tricks of the Indians in exchanging guns and shooting at a mark, they suddenly fired upon the whole party while the guns of the men were unloaded. Baker, Webster, and Mrs. Jones were killed almost instantly. Mr. Jones started for the woods, but a second shot stopped him. He was a man of splendid physique and did not die without a struggle. The Indians at once returned to the house of Jones, shot Mrs. Wilson, and then fled. 70 persons attended the inquest, and a greater conversation prevailed owing to their complete uncertainty as who and what occurred next. It was felt that there was no security against further deprivation. These events occurred in the lower or the Redwood Agency. Remember, this is a 60-mile by 150 strip, 2 agencies on both ends.
Right, and I was wondering, from an observer's point of view, who wrote this, how did they know the
What?
The chronological order of the events?
I don't know, but this is the only book.
That's sort of my point. Is like, okay, so who told them this is how it went? Go on. I'm sorry.
All I can say is that all the papers and all the stuff I've read, this is the only book that I've come across that actually tells you a chain of events. So that's why we're reading this today, because I have papers from Wikipedia, as you can see here, and, goes on, and it doesn't talk about, it talks about volunteers and soldiers and yada yada, and the agencies and treaties and land.
So can I clear something up in my head?
Yes, go ahead.
So it was several native men who went from house to house looking for a gun?
Apparently, yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's basically so. Would would them folks open up the door and say, "Come on in"? Back in then days, or did
Yes.
the native folks kind of open up and kind of walk in? You know what I mean? I'm just
Well,
curious.
apparently, uh, Mr. Howard and his wife, they were given water, remember, and
Right.
went to Mr. Jones's house. She okay, because of this gun. Remember, he was they were talking about this gun, and he'd already borrowed a gun, or he wanted to borrow a gun. So these people all knew each other. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Let's see, the quarrel of Mr. Jones concerning a gun that one of them had borrowed but failed to return. See, so Mr. Jones already knew these Indians. They must have been sort of friends at that point because he had borrowed him a gun. I mean, you don't borrow, hey, knock on your door and say, hey, can I borrow a gun? No, you just don't give anybody a gun. These
Yeah,
Indians
they must have traded with them in the past.
Yes, exactly. Traded, worked for
Successfully traded with them in the past.
Yes, because the ladies weren't afraid of them. They were kind of like, they're kind of weird and everything. But, we just let Mr. And then, of course, they went out there and they started shooting at marks. So, these guys were all shooting shots. It's like, hey, let's go target practice. The Indians and the men, and they're finally, I suppose somebody said, here, watch me. I'll just shoot the men. And, they won't know what hit them.
And and it says also that they waited until the men shot their weapons so they didn't have chance to reload.
That's right. That's right. See, there was a plan there. Okay, the events
Sneaky.
occurred. Oh yeah, sneaky. These events occurred in the Lower or Redwood Agency. As soon as the relatives of the murderers heard what had been done, they resolved to begin the massacre at once in order to save the assassins from being given up to justice. At an early hour on Monday morning, they started for the house of Little Crow. Now, Little Crow played a big role in it. He was a chief. Little Crow, a man prominent among the Indians in intelligence and power. By the time they reached his house, the number 150 men, all mounted, all yelling and frantic to begin the butchery. Here, the die is cast. Little Crow, who had not yet arisen and was awakened by the noise and sat up in his bed, they questioned him as to what they should do. He was up for a moment in the deepest perplexity, and beads of perspiration came from his forehead because he knew what was going to happen. This had been planned out for a while. He had been to Washington and knew well the great power of the whites, and yet he was exceedingly ambitious, and he had recently been defeated for his speakership of the tribe through the bribery and suspicion of his sympathy for the whites. He was a powerful orator, and he knew that if he yielded now to their wishes, his abilities would at once make him a leader of his nation. He decided for war. He said, trouble with the whites is sooner or later inevitable. It may as well take place now as any other time. I am with you. Let us go to the agency and kill the traitors and take their goods. At once, they rode off, sending word to the other bands and breaking up into small squads as they entered town. The inhabitants were totally unprepared, and their fate was sealed. Agent Gabarther had only 2 or 3 days previously sent 45 men from this place to Fort Snelling to enlist them for the Southern War. There was no armed force in town. The first shot was fired at McKendrick's store. James Lindy, the clerk, was instantly killed. Now, people, if you don't like this is going to be a little probably gory, so prepare yourself. One of the Indians exclaimed before he fired, "Now I will kill the dog who would not give me credit." See what happens when you get people addicted to credit? 2 other occupants of the store were shot at the same time. The Kingdrick's son was upstairs, and when he heard the firing, concealed himself under a dry goods box. The Indians feared to go up, at least he would shoot them, and to force him to come down, they proposed to burn the building. Thereupon, young McKendrick clambered out through the scully, slipped down the lightning rod, and ran for the Minnesota River. But a shot from a Sioux brought him down mortally wounded, meaning he was wounded to the part where he's going to die. Probably shot in the gut or something. Death dealing.
Or shot in the back if he was running.
Well, that too. Yeah, back somewhere. Anyway, he was shot. So they shot everybody. And they didn't really care. As the Indians entered another store, a clerk resolving to attempt an escape rushed through their midst and succeeded in getting about 200 yards from the store when he received 2 shots. Yeah, he got a double barrel. The Indians coming up stripped him, piled some logs over him to prevent his escape, saying that they would return soon and cut him up. While suffering the greatest torture, he succeeded in extracting himself and making his escape. When all were butchered that they could be met with at the agency, the miscreants scattered themselves over the adjoining country, slaughtering people on their way. At the ferry, Malty, a heroic ferryman, continued to carry over all who came, and was killed just as he had taken the last man across. He was disemboweled and his hands, feet, and head cut off and thrust into his cavity, meaning they cut his appendages off, cut his guts open, disemboweled him, and put his arms, legs, and head inside his gut. Yeah. Among the killed,
the body cavity.
In the body cavity, yeah, exactly. Ugh. Like I said, it's going to get kind of bad here, people. Among the killed was a fat, good-natured, and inoffensive barber, a violinist of ability and always in demand of entertainments. Aristocracies committed atrocities committed in this war almost surpassed belief. 700 people perished, most of them under circumstances of the most hardening cruelty. Neither age nor sex was rendered. All human instincts seemed to have left the savages. Tears and appeals for mercy only provoked laughter. Their great ambition seemed to be to outderive each other in new and most refined forms of devilish torture. Girls of a tender age were tied to the ground and violated successively by an entire gang of ruffians until death from exhaustion ended their sufferings. Wow. The father returned home to find almost his entire family killed. He succeeded in conveying to St. Peter's one boy who had been left for dead. One who saw him there said he was asleep, but occasionally a low, heart-piercing moan escaped his lips. At times he would attempt to turn over, and then in agony, occasioned by the movement, would groan most piteously. At length he awoke, his lips quivering in pain. The meaningless expression of his eyes added new horror to the dreadful sight, until sickened to my soul I left the room. Before noon of the first day of the outbreak, the news reached the fort, and Captain Marsh started out for the agency with 48 men in wagons. Ooh, I got a picture of that one. So 48 men in wagons. Thought I had a picture of that one. Yeah. Oh, wrong one. Oh yeah, here's the one. 48 men in wagons. This is an interesting one. Started out for the agency with wagons. He was a brave and daring officer who had recently served in the Civil War, escaping many dangers only to die now by the hands of the Red Men. Death of brave Marsh. Disregarding the repeated warnings of fugitives, he pressed on to the ferry. The Indians were concealed behind logs on opposite sides of the road. They also sent a force by a long detour across the river, and unknown to Marsh and his men, succeeded in surrounding them. Being told that it was was certain death to cross the marsh, reluctantly gave the order to about face. At this moment, the Indians, with hideous yells, poured in a storm of lead among the whites, and half of their number fell at the first volley. Marsh, with 9 of his men, succeeded in getting to 2 miles down the river. Perceiving that the Indians were intercepting them, he gave the word to cross the stream and gallantly led the way himself, holding his revolver over his head in one hand and his sword in the other. Suddenly, in the middle of the current, he was seen to be sinking. 2 men went to his assistance, but were too late. Being an excellent swimmer, it is inferred that he was seized with a cramp. The 9 men reached the fort in safety. Of course, Marsh drowned. The next movements of the Indians consisted in attacks upon New Ulm and Fort Ridgely. The agent of the reservation, Gilbrath, was at St. Peter's when the news reached him. His men spent the night in running bullets, and in the morning assembled the inhabitants. Everyone who had a gun enlisted. Judge Flambeau was elected commander. The full number of the Indians was now about 400, and they were divided in council and scattered into quest for plunder. Gilbrath and his squad of men made his way to Fort Ridgely, and ex-sheriff Broadman and his party of 15 mounted men dashed at full speed to New Ulm, just as the division of the enemy had begun to attack upon the outskirts of the town and had killed several. Oh boy. Okay, 4,000 hostiles. The inhabitants, mostly German, were in a state of panic and utter helplessness. They were huddled together in the center of town within a barricade of wagons and barrels, etc., and more. When Boardman arrived, they sallied forth and lent their assistance in driving off the enemy. Judge Lambeau arrived in the evening with 100 men and soon succeeded in getting affairs into military shape. On Wednesday at 3 o'clock, Little Crow made an attack on Fort Ridgely, and on Friday he and his men fell back to the agency. Here he found that the upper Indians had come to his assistance, and all numbering 450 returned to the fort. Concealing themselves near at hand, they set out 20 warriors who appeared on the prairie, waving their blankets and uttering cries of desertion and defiance in order to entice the defenders out of the fort. Not succeeding in this, entire force poured in a shower of lead on the fort. The ravens were fairly alive with the Indians, and for 5 hours they maintained a persistent attack. A determined charge would undoubtedly have resulted in the fall of the fort, as a portion of the squares of which it was composed consisted only of wooden buildings which the bullets of the enemy pierced in showers. Among those in the fort were Messrs. Wyckoff, Hatch, Ramsey, who had with them some $72,000 in coin to make payment. They had arrived on Monday, the day of the uprising. They had reached there on Saturday. The massacre would probably not have occurred. So here they come with the money, these guys, but they didn't get there until after the attack. So if the attack would have just happened a little bit less, they could have paid them out and everybody would have been happy and went home. They didn't. The short time previous to the first attack on the fort, a man named Henry Ballin left it and was soon so surrounded by Indians in the woods that he was unable to move in any direction. For several hours, he lay concealed in the bushes. Many times the Indians approached so near to him as to almost discover him. During the attack, a heavy thunderstorm occurred, and about 100 Indians assembled close to where Ballin was lying, holding their guns under their blankets to keep them dry. Remember, these are black powder guns. At dark, he escaped. Went about 30 miles distance to meet a soldier who informed him that he was going to the fort. Ballin warned him that he would never reach it alive, and indeed he did not, being shot down by the brother of Little Crow when he had almost arrived at his destination. If you warn somebody you're going to get shot and killed before you get there, would you still keep going? That's a good question, right? Thrilling spectacle. On Saturday, the 23rd of August, the Indians made another and far more serious attack upon New Ulm. Judge Flamdow conducted his men to the open prairie about a half mile from the town, better to receive and repel the charge of the enemy. About 10 o'clock, the Indians bore down upon the band. 250 whites, at first slowly and then with increasing velocity. It was a thrilling and terrible spectacle to this inexperienced militia. So the soldiers were very militia. Sorry.
Now, let me imagine here's 1862. They're all lining up, across the field, like they did, between the North and the South. So that's how the battle is. It's not like they're, here and there. They're lining up just like they did in the, that was standard Army tactics at the time. Every time I interrupt, I'm trying to help give folks, hopefully, picture this in your mind, what's going on.
Yep, exactly.
But now the natives are not necessarily, that's not necessarily their warfare, but they will meet the white man on his terms kind of thing. So, okay.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. The Indians were skilled warriors, and you're just recruiting anybody you can to fight. And so these troops are not really military men. They're just here's a gun. We're going to go, get the enemy. So here we go.
Here's a farmer with a rifle.
Yeah, put a rifle in that farmer's hand and get them go. So within about a mile and a half of the whites, the Indians' force spread out like a fan, increasing the velocity of approach continually. They're flanking them, When within a double rifle shot, they utter a terrific yell and charge with swiftness. The whites, somewhat disconcerted by the terrifying yells, at first fell back and committed the error of allowing the Indians to gain possession of the outlying houses of the town. The fight continued for hours with varying fortune, the Indians gradually approaching nearer and nearer to the town, behind the burning houses, of course, lighting everything on fire as they go. In the afternoon, about 60 Indians made a charge from the riverside, dashing furiously forward, some on ponies and some on foot. This was a critical point of the action. Several hours of fighting had served to steady the men, and they advanced with a cheer, scattering the Indians in every direction. At dark, the enemy withdrew. During the night, the besieging dug a series of rifle pits and otherwise strengthened their defenses. But on the following morning, the Indians made but a feeble renewal of the attack and soon retired with a considerable decrease in their number. The loss of the whites was about 10 killed and 50 wounded. But for the gallantry of the white men in repelling the charge of the Indians, more lives would have been lost in the end. After an engagement was ceased on Sunday morning, an Indian who had been firing from a house near the whites escaped by coolly marching off with a feather bed on his back. His person was completely concealed, and the whites, supposing him to be a citizen, One of them remarked, "What a fool! That man is too exposed himself in that way." When the wily Indian was out of rifle shot, he threw aside the bed and danced and shouted diversively. Ah, how tricky is that?
Hey, well, can you imagine him standing down at the bottom of the hill, or something, and he throws off that mattress? That must have been, something out of the movies kind of thing,
Yeah, those things really do happen. Oh my goodness.
Yep, and they did. Yep.
Revolting crimes. Details of individual sufferings attended upon the first outbreak from the shocking narrative. One of the killed was Mr. Amos Huggins, who was engaged in teaching an Indian school. Remember, we talked about him earlier. Engaged in teaching an Indian school at the Lacquay Parallel. He was born among the Indians and had passed his life in their midst, befriending them and treating them with self-sacrificing kindness. Yet these were the men who shot him down. In one place, 27 bodies were discovered, bloody, ghastly, and mutilated, lying in a heap in an obscure spot. A little child was striving to draw nourishment from its dead mother's breast, and was the only thing that showed signs of life. 4 Indians went to the door of man. What?
So it was Indians against the whites with that.
Yeah. So
okay.
they were just killing away. We've heard stories about this before, where the Indian lady got killed and the child is clinging to her breast, but now it's a white man. Same thing. 4 Indians.
I just wanted to make sure.
4 Indians went to the door of a man named Anderson, shook hands with him, and asked him for some milk. After drinking it and returning the pan, they raised their guns and shot him dead. They also shot and killed the son, who had gone to the garden to dig potatoes for them. During those fearful days, many persons wandered over the prairies or through the woods to a state of starvation. Cattle were rotting in the prairies on every side. Tens of thousands of acres with crops just ready to be harvested, either decayed in the fields or were trodden underfoot. Over an area of 20,000 square miles, the firebrand and the tomahawk reigned supreme. Now, isn't that scary or what? Now, this goes on, and we've gone quite a ways, and I want to get you in on your story. But you know what? We're going to continue on with this next week, because there's so much here to talk about. This was quite the thing. It went on for so long, and it scared so many people that about 20% of the population evacuated Minnesota. Believe it or not. Like I said, these people, they were out there, they were running around they were killing pretty much anybody and everybody and anything living. They were wreaking havoc. Here they come to your door. Can you imagine? Hey, the Indians are always friendly, and they come to your door. Hey, can we have some milk? Yeah, sure. Hey, I'll have my son go dig you some potatoes. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And then the next thing you know, they're pulling up a gun and shooting you in the head. And then they go out and shoot your son and your wife and disembowel you and shoot your animals and move on. I guess they were looking for a little retribution. Hey, you stole all our land. You don't give us any food. And
you lied to us.
Yeah, you lied to us. You didn't pay us. And what do you expect from us? Well, the big conclusion will happen next week. So join us here next week. And I'll finish this all up because it gets interesting. Because eventually, Little Crow, I did a lot. Like I said, I did a bunch of research on this, and Little Crow knew this was all going to happen. He was kind of a church-going man, and he did go the last day, that Sunday before the uprising. He went to church, sat in the back pew, And then after services were up, he got up and left, and they've never seen him again. Yet he would come back and pretty much kill everybody in that church. Not in the church, but that went to the church. Just kind of crazy.
Say that last part again.
That went to the church. All those people would be dead.
They came back and killed all the people in the church?
No, all the people that would attend the church, would end up dying because of this.
Oh.
They were, a little crow. He was the leader of this whole rebellion kind of thing. He was mustering. And the bad part I found out about this whole thing was that the Indians were very unorganized. They were great fighters singly. So you're dealing with a lot of people that would fight individually, but now you've got to, kind of somehow string them together and organize them to fight as a unit. You know what I'm saying? When they're used to fighting as like, 2 or 3 guys or 5 guys or 6 guys or whatever, but now you got 400
or
guys.
20 guys even.
Yeah, and now you got 400 guys that need to fight together, and how do you coordinate them? It ain't like you got walkie-talkies or they're out there, and the chief, he only kind of really makes suggestions like, hey, let's go attack, let's do this, or let's stop and sign the peace treaty. That's his job. He doesn't go out there and say, okay, now you go here, you go there, and you guys stay here, and this is what we're going to do, blah, 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 blah. Because once you get out there, you're basically a free agent. That's, you're a brave, you're out there, you're a free agent. You want to go over there and attack, that's their problem. Remember, they would go there and they would attack something, and they're like, oh, look at all the spoils we're going to get all this stuff. And while they're grabbing up the goods, the people are getting away and running to the woods. I get away. Oh my God, they're taking my stuff, but I'm going to get alive. I'm going to be alive. I'm not going to be dead. Yeah. Mental note. Don't attend church. Yep. There you go, Scotty boy.
But there was a lot, the Indians had a lot more coordination than what people give them credit for. And they had hand signals. They could give a whoop or two and do a hand signal, and everybody knew what that meant. And it's interesting how the native folks almost knew it instinctively. Like, it's sort of like everybody knew what the game plan was ahead of time, like in a football game. So it was sort of like a quick huddle. So it's like, okay, everybody, whoop, there's a quarterback down here, because there was always a brave every so many so many Indian braves. There was sort of like a chief down the line, so they all knew what was going on. They had little huddles together, so they were pretty daggum successful. Now they're on the whole, like you said, they did just run rampant and in small groups and provide terror across the land.
Yeah, and that was another thing too, is when I was reading about they attacked that fort. There's more story to it, that they were attacking the fort. They were doing really good, but the fort had a cannon, and nobody knew how to run the cannon except for one guy. And they covered the guy until he got to the cannon. Once he started firing the cannon, the Indians dispersed, because they really didn't have no defenses against the cannon. They just knew that a cannon meant danger. It could shoot a long ways. It could shoot a lot of stuff and kill a lot of people at one time. And so you don't want to be anywhere near that thing.
Yeah, back in those days, they used to load anything at all into the cannon, because they might not have, one cannonball is not going to do that much damage, but they would load pieces of chain, horseshoes, the nails from the horseshoes, all kinds of stuff, and they'd load them in the cannons and then shoot them off. And that's like instant shrapnel. It's like using, buckshot. And so, and a couple of times with a cannon, I'd be backing off too. You know what I mean? So wait a minute now.
But plus it would, go. It could go a long ways, way farther than what you could shoot with the gun.
Yeah, well, there is that too, but but the Indians didn't know which one it was, so they might sneak up close to the fort and then get hit with grape shot, as they called it, or
Yeah,
you'd be coming in from a distance and get hit with artillery. So, that's sort of my point. They didn't know which one they was going to get. They just knew that stuff was dangerous.
that's right. That's right. That cannon fires. You better run. Yeah, and it wasn't like they had metal shields to hide behind or something. And even so, like you said, if a cannonball, Scotty Boy says silverware, you name it, they loaded into the cannon. Yeah, and,
That's right.
But even if it was just a cannonball, still you ain't hiding behind even a big tree. It's gonna blow a hole in a big tree. You're dead. And if you're and what that's another thing. When that cannonball goes, it just doesn't hit the ground. It may roll and bounce and kill 3, 4, and 5 guys. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
Well, listening to some of these old war guys, if they might have had a cannon, but they knew how many cannonballs they had.
yeah,
Yeah. And so they just couldn't sit there and fire cannonballs all day because they only had so many. So they had to make them count, by the way.
But you're right, and they had to make them count. But still, once you start hearing that cannon, even if you know that guy's got 20 cannonballs, I'm getting the heck out of here. I mean, it just ain't worth keeping up the fight. Why would I do that?
The natives don't know how many they got, unless they look over and, can they count, but the one thing the natives did know was that for every time they shot, that was one less that they had.
That's true. It's just like when you load your gun, and
That's right.
1 minute to put the bullet in there, and they know while you're loading that bullet, you're defenseless.
And every time you fire one, that's one less bullet you got.
That's right. That is that is so true. Well, anyway, continuation of this next week, when we'll find out what happened to these guys and what became of them. And it wasn't good, but for as many people it was uprising, it was kind of crazy. So join us next time. What do you got for a story tonight?
So I'm assuming it'll be sort of like the Nuremberg trials of that Indian war.
Pretty much.
In a way. I couldn't remember, but do you remember which book we were in?
Yeah,
I've got it pulled up here, but I can't remember if I read number 2 or if we're on number 3.
We're on number 2 or 3. You told the story of the creation of the world, remember?
Yeah, well, that was number 1, right? Where is my... There it is.
Yeah, we're on number 2, the making of daylight.
All right, so... Oh, that's what it is. This is a really short story. So, and then there's number 3. If you want to continue on with that, or if you just wanted, I've got 4 cards pulled, by the way, and but this is a really short story. So, if you want more story, just let me know, and we'll take a pause. I'll get a drink, and we'll go on with number 3.
All right, it's all up to you. Here you go.
No, you got to help me with that now.
What?
As if we're going to do another story. So just look at the time and see what we got. Okay, when I get done with this and just see how our time's doing.
Well, let's see how it is. I'll come back. I ain't going anywhere. I'm going to be right here. All right. Anyway, okay. Depends how fast you read. So, okay. So all you.
Ako Maui and Atsujikwi, Tales and Myths by R. Dixon, 1909. This story is number 2 in this book, and it's called The Making of Daylight. Akomawi. In the beginning, it was always dark. Darkness was a woman who had 2 daughters and came from the eastward to gamble with Wildcat. She reached Wildcat's house at night, and after supper began to talk about gambling, saying, "I never came here before. I came to gamble." The others present advised Wildcat to play. So all the preparations were made, and sitting on either side of the fire, they began to play. Darkness bet her 2 daughters against all the people which Wildcat had. Darkness wanted Wildcat to bet her husband, Chicken Hawk, but she did not wish to. Finally, on Coyote's advice, she bet him as chief first. Then they began to play, Coyote helping to sing. He thought the game was going favorably and that Wildcat would win the 2 girls and that he would get them for wives. But just as she was almost won, Darkness beat her, and taking Coyote, broke him in two and threw him outside. Darkness then threatened to stay dark all the time unless Wildcat would bet her husband, as Darkness wanted him for a husband for her daughters. Wildcat refused and bet other people in the house. All but 3 offered themselves to be bet. These were Rabbit, Weasel, and Caterpillar. Finally, all were lost to Darkness but these, and then Caterpillar said, "Bet me," and he came near where Wildcat sat. They were gambling with a small slippery thing like ice, instead of the usual gambling bone. Caterpillar began to sing and to win. Pretty soon, all but one of Darkness's counters were gone, and she began to be afraid. She was afraid of the smooth gambling stick. Caterpillar told her to sit still as she was moving about nervously. Suddenly, he slid the gambling stick across at her, and entering her body, it caused her to burst. Then Caterpillar took her body and threw it outside. The 2 girls were sitting there crying. One of them was going to gamble. She told Caterpillar to deal, but he refused. So she began and won until Caterpillar had only 1 counter left. Then he began to win and finally killed her just as he had her mother. He then threw her body outside. Only the youngest sister was left. Caterpillar told her not to cry, as he was not crying, although all his people were lost. They played and played, and as before, Caterpillar killed her by the same trick. Then Caterpillar said, in after time, people will say that I was the one who won my people back. Still, however, it was dark. So Lizard set to work to try to make light. He went over to Big Lizard's house and took a light with him. He told Big Lizard all about what had happened and told him that he and Caterpillar and Rabbit were the only ones left. Then Lizard put on his cap and began to dance. His cap was made of a grizzly bear's head. Rabbit was talking, singing, while Lizard was dancing near the house post. By and by it began to grow light. Lizard made daylight come by dancing. Rabbit said, "That is what people will say. That is what people must say. Daylight is coming. Daylight is coming." Then she made a mistake and sang about a man. Lizard was angry and said, "You are always thinking about men." His grandmother answered, "I meant to sing properly, but my teeth are all gone, and so I made a mistake." Lizard then told Rabbit to go out and see where light was coming. He went up and looked to the east, saw the dawn, and heard the birds singing. He came back and said, "I did not see anything." By and by, he went up again after Lizard had danced some more. This time, daylight had come. All over the world, people woke up and made a noise. Then Lizard stopped dancing. He told people to open the doors, to build a fire, and go out. It was springtime, and sunflowers were ripening. All the people came out and talked about lizards having made the light. The end.
Nice. Nice, nice, nice. That was a good one. Lizard made the light. They had to kill off the darkness.
Yeah, they had to bet and bet. Now, do you want another story, or you want to go straight to the cards?
I think that third story is pretty long.
Okie doke.
It is pretty long. It's 2, 3.
It's about 6 or 7 pages.
Yeah, it's quite a long one. Yeah, maybe just do the cards. Sorry, I took a lot of time. Otherwise, we'd have had enough for.
Oh, I'm not worried about that.
I had to cut that one too. There's just so much information on that, and I hope people go out there and look it up, because boy, when I started looking it up, there was just so much more to it than I ever thought there was. I thought, oh, the Indians uprose and they went around and they killed a few settlers and then they got hunted down and blah 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 blah, right? But no, here you are. The thing is that, again, just like every other time in Indian history, the Indians sold their land off. They, got moved onto a reservation, and then they got hungry, and the white people kept saying, "Hey, let's take some more of your land, and then some more of your land, and then some more of your land." And pretty soon they're like, hey dude, how much more do you want? And they, in the same way with these Indians is, you know what we're going to do? We're going to give you all 80 acres each. And then you'll be your master of your own little plot of land. Instead of having, a 60 by 150 mile section by the river, we're going to give you all 80 acres. But then you got all this extra land, and we'll tell you what we'll do is we're going to give you some money for that extra land, because you got so much of it, and then you'll be able to buy a nice house and some farm stuff, and you'll be farmers, and it'll be good, and you'll be rich. Unfortunately,
and you'll be like us.
Yes, you'll be more like the white man, and then you can pay taxes and things like that. And when it's all said and done, well, now we got more land too. See, that's the problem. It's like, oh, the Indians got all this land. Well, now the white man has all this land, and now they're dividing it up. And as you can see right now, it's like it's kind of the same struggle as like with the farmers, for instance. You got hundreds of farms, 100 years ago. Each one is a little chunk of land. Well, then, you're getting old, sell your farm. Now the farms get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you got, farms with 200 acres, 300, 4, 5, 6, 1,000, 10,000. Now, well, nobody can afford to buy 10,000 acres from a farmer. So big corporations come in and they buy the 10,000. They got 10 or 20 or 30 or 40, 50,000 acres, chunks, because they're a corporation. They can do that. Well, now there's no little small farmers. What?
Right down the street from me. I mean, literally like a half a mile down the road. They recently had a 150-acre farm.
Yeah.
Now, mostly in cows, small pond, and some of it was in tillage, and a 3-bedroom ranch style with a 1-car garage, a couple of amenities. You want to guess how much?
$1.5 million.
Not quite $1 million.
Oh boy.
But for around here, that is a lot of money.
Yeah.
You used to be able to get that for like $225,000. You could have got the house and the same amount of property like 5 years ago.
Well, yeah, and see, this is the thing. At some point, you're getting to that point where, you're the group of people you can sell that to gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then
they had a bunch of people lining up, I'll tell you.
Yeah, but I'm looking at it like, who can afford $1 million place?
Oh, yeah, right, exactly.
But that's what I'm saying. It's getting smaller.
And look at the bank options and everything, I mean, I'm sitting here on my place, and I don't know what I originally paid for it. But a couple of years ago, I thought it was the same value, and it was worth $49,000. My 18 acres and house, right?
Yeah.
So my buddy's over here about a week ago, and he goes, you need to look on your statement there, Dave, and now it's worth $62,000. In the last 3 years, it went from 49 to 62.5 or something. So I'm just sitting here, and it's like, well, I haven't done anything, no improvements, but the value, somebody else has valued it as to be more money.
And then there's the thing too, is if it's the county's saying that it's valued at that, but if you were to sell that, you probably get 100,000.
Maybe.
Yeah, but I'm just saying is
maybe 75, but
that's what I'm saying. The value has gone up so much, and then that's the same with these houses. At some point, who can afford to buy $1 million house and then pay the interest on it? Even if you could, you only had a mortgage half of that, $500,000. Who's paying the payments on that? What kind of job do you got to have? That's what I'm saying. It's like, and then
absolutely, because we had discussed, wonder how much that piece is going to go for. And a buddy of mine says, well, I could put in a bid, and I know that I could put $15,000 or $20,000 down in cash, and I probably could get that from the bank, and then I set up payments. Well, then when they started putting in the bids, it was like, yeah, I can't afford this. It's up to $750,000. Now there were a few cows on it, and it is a nice piece of property, but I couldn't believe that it was $750,000 that it went for.
But that's what I'm saying, is it gets to a point of ridiculousness. The group of people that could actually afford that place is gonna be just minuscule. And then if you do,
yes.
Do these people have the money in the bank? Are they just independently wealthy? And if they buy,
and you know what? They're carpetbaggers in that they're not from the South. They're folks from other states coming here, and in some cases from other countries. And there's across the river down yonder a little ways. there's 120 acres owned by a couple of German brothers, and you know, and they 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 have used the timber and so forth, and used it for hunting, and they have done well as to, you know, and as far as general forestry practices, but it still don't belong to anybody down here. You know what I mean? So the property's being divided, and so what used to be owned by Southerners, just like the Indians, is now being parceled up and sold to other entities, meaning Northerners or, you know, folks from someplace else. And it's like, it's interesting. It's interesting. And one other thing about this, somebody somewhere is setting these values, because my property should probably be about $5,000 less valuable than it was 3 years ago, because there's some maintenance. I need a roof over here on this section. I mean, so my property value should have gone down because of the maintenance I need on the place. But no, it went up. So, but who's setting it? Somebody out there in the great void is like, property is valued at this. So the same thing was going on back then. Those folks, whoever was controlling it, they're still in control of it, okay? Because they're saying the property is this value. And so therefore we gave you so many blankets and this, and now you owe us, you know.
Yeah.
So, but it's astounding. You know, when I looked at my tax return, I went, what? Or tax bill. It went like, what?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. You didn't do anything, and yet it keeps going up and up and up and up and up and up. And I think of the same stuff. It's like at some point, you know, you're lucky you bought a cheap place, because you know, if you would have bought $150,000 home back in the day, or a chunk of land, it would be now worth $200,000-300,000, and they would look at you and say, okay, now your tax bill is X, Y, and Z, and you'd say, but I don't make that much money. I don't have that money. How am I going to pay the taxes? I don't make that kind of money to pay taxes on this value of this house that you now say it's like $300,000 when I only paid $100,000, right?
Well, the value for my house was like 10 grand because I built it myself, and it's made out of old barn wood. So, you know, but it suits me, you know, and so the value of my home is the value that I put in it, you know, and it's keeping me right now. I got a little tiny air conditioner back there. Now it's humid. It's the middle of summertime, you know, but you know, there ain't nothing we can't, you know, deal with. But but to see folks nowadays try to just find some little small piece of something to get a start on. Yeah. So even back in the day when when the landowner helped, he financed the place for the first couple of years because he wanted to sell it. And he met me, and we kind of hit it off. And he goes, I'd rather sell it to you as somebody else because you'll take care of the place. And he had sort of opinionated to it, right? So I feel the same way after all these years. But so I can't remember how much I actually paid for it, but it was probably less than 30,000. Yeah. You know, so now it's worth 60, almost 63. Magically, somehow it's gotten, you know, more valuable, you know, but
it will keep getting more valuable because, like you said, that place down the road now it went from, you know, 250,000, now it's 750,000, and that makes, now people are going to say, well, if that's 750, what's your place worth? Well, maybe your place is worth 100,000.
Well, actually more, because the property line on the back end is the middle of the little Ochlockonee River.
Mhm.
It is literally a river. It's designated on maps and stuff, but it's the Little Ocklawaha, and right now there ain't no water in it. Me and my
Mhm.
neighbor, we were talking about it today, and if I could get down there, I'd be walking it because it's dry as a bone in a lot of places. But so for someone to buy property literally where their property line is in the middle of a river, somehow the value, it's an intrinsic value, but ain't nobody selling property on the river. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know,
And not pieces of property my size. Everything else is 2, 3, 4, 500 acres. And I'm the only one, me and Ricky are the only two that are less than 25 acres that could be for sale.
hmm yeah. No, no. I get it. I get it. Like it says, it's kind of weird how all that works, but you know, land values and where it's located, and at some point, you know, will you end up getting taxed out of your home because the neighbor put up $1 million house next to you, you know, kind of thing.
Right.
You know, and that's what I'm saying is you didn't do anything but live. You know, you bought a cheap piece of land and you're all good and all happy, and then the neighbor goes, and they did this went back when I was in Wisconsin. They had the lakefront houses, and there was guys who first came in there back in the 50s when they put the lake up and bought little chunks of land and built a little cabin on the river, you know, and nobody was there. But now these other little chunks of land come along, and some guy comes in and builds $1 million mega home, you know, like something the movie stars would live in. And then you're sitting next in your little cabin built in the 50s, and you can't afford to live there because they upped the taxes so high on your piece of property that these people have to sell off. And they were doing that. They were selling pieces off because they just couldn't afford a taxes. And I couldn't imagine, because I worked for some of these people, you know, putting in a little boat dock or something like that. And they would be like, you know, I'm paying, my taxes are $12,000 a year for this 1 acre I have.
Yep.
And I'm like, you got to
Because it's lakefront property all of a sudden. Well, I mean, you know, and somebody somewhere decided that that acre of property on that lake is worth X amount of money. And so, you know, the acre of property in Wisconsin, you know, is because it's on the water. Somebody somewhere says that acreage is worth the same amount as an acre down here on the lake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And
And
that's
I'm
where,
like, you know, like we said, I'm sitting here doing nothing. I remember at the, you know, that one point my property was worth 40 grand and I was content, you know, you know, and it's paid for. And now it's worth 62, but, you know, thank goodness. And here I am on, you know, limited income, Social Security. And it's like now my property value keeps going up. And so does, you know, they don't give us seniors a break, you know.
mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying is you know, I got a buddy, he's got a house and everything. I says, you know, that's awful nice, but what happens when, you know, it gets to a point where you retire and your taxes are already high, and then they double by that time, and then you're looking at it going, oh, how do I afford this? I'm on Social Security now, and I got a little pension or something, and now all my money goes to my taxes because I got this little house somewhere, and a neighbor built $1 million home up the street. You know.
Yep. My sister lives in Zephyr Hills, Florida, and she's retired too. Got a real small 2-bedroom trailer. It's like a 1950, 60 trailer. It's an older model trailer. Nice trailer though. And a little porch off of it, not much. And it's sitting on, you know, like a, you know, an eighth of an acre, really small. You walk out off her front porch and you're in the neighbor's yard. And so, and, you know, she goes, David, she goes, my rent went up by $75. And I was like, what? She goes, a month. And I was like, but Lynn, but it didn't, where are they getting this value at? And she goes, well, that's just it. All the rental properties and everything down there in Separate Hills, because it's old people, blah, 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 and everything, and it's so valuable. Then all the rich people moved down there and built all these expensive homes, and it drove up the prices of these tiny little lots that all of these, that are most 99% of the people in that small little trailer park are all retired. Yep. And all their rents went up by $75 a lot because the taxes that the county went up on, because somewhere magically they said it was worth more money. Somebody sets those values, and whoever sets those values needs to be shot. Drawn and quartered, keyhauled. I mean, because why did you make, what is the worth? What makes $1 million home $1 million?
Somebody said so.
And I've worked on houses, this construction and putting in wiring and stuff, over the years. And my next door neighbor, him and Miss Sheila, they do sheetrock work, and they're doing sheetrock on this great big house they're working on right now. And they're like, what, wouldn't you want to come down and sand? Anyway, but so here are these people building these humongous houses, and of course all the materials are gone up, and of course all the contractors have to make more money, so the price goes up, and now the property is worth more money, so the price goes up. And then the next thing you know, what used to be a $125,000 home and very adequate, very nice, is now worth, $750,000.
Yeah. What? And like I said, they become unaffordable for the common man, and and they're going to stay that way, and it's going to get worse and worse to the point where, it's but who wants to live in one of those big, fancy, rich $1 million homes? How can you afford that? You got to have somebody clean it for you. You know what I mean? And do things. It's like, it's hard enough for me to clean this little place. And I'm sure your house is the same. It's just trying to upkeep this little space. And now you have $1 million home. How do you upkeep that unless you got buku bucks in the first place?
Yeah, I was working for an alarm company years ago and was working on this one house that it was 2-story with a 3rd-story attic. And me and another family could have lived in the attic. Okay. And so the 2nd floor was just for the children. Had 3 kids, so it was 3-bedroom. Now downstairs with the master bedroom, mom and daddy, and this huge kitchen and open. Oh my God. And back then they had ordered some kind of large screen TV that they didn't have back then. They had to special order the thing. And the living room, you could play baseball in the thing, And so I mean, huge. And so we had talked about it and how they had built this big home. And they had the money back then, and the kids and all of this. Well, now the kids are out of high school, went to college. Ain't nobody but him and mama in the house. Mm-hmm. Now they have this 300 and something thousand square foot building, and they're only living in this small part of it, and the rest of it's gone to waste.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. This big giant place, and now you got to hire people upkeep it and heat it and refurbish it and shingle it and do all the things. And the less you use it, it still goes to pot. You got to keep maintaining it. And then the taxes. Now the kids have moved out. You got this big home, and the taxes went through the roof, and you're looking at it going, holy cow, I spent all my money on the taxes and the upkeep and all this other stuff so we can live in a little bitty section of it.
And now they're in their 70s on Social Security, And so it's like, what? So there are folks who, the American dream, sometimes it ain't what it, they have overdreamt it. They have dreamed a little bit too much. But nowadays, the market is such that it'd be hard to dream at all.
I agree.
Not to be negative, but you know, looking around, it's just like it's just hard to dream at all.
Yeah, yeah. You want to buy a house, and then you look at the interest and all the stuff, and you're going to pay on it for 30 years, and it's like, I know I'm getting on my older years, and all of a sudden it's like, man, if I have a 30-year mortgage, I'll be working until I'm carrying a cane and my hair is all white, you know. And it's like, I don't want to pay on it for 30 years. I want to buy it and have it now. I don't need a big expensive place, but there's getting to the point where there's no cheap places unless you're going to spend a lot of time fixing. So anyway, maybe the cards will show us the way. How about that? Hey, welcome, Karen. Karen, I know Karen. I love big old houses. Yes, big old houses and big new houses. That's what we're talking about. And maybe you heard the whole conversation, but I was thinking about out at the lake. Who doesn't like to go out to the lake? She lives out there by the lake and out at Castle Rock. Who hasn't been there at the Castle Rock Lake by Wisconsin Dells? Enjoyed some of that fun scenery on a paddle boat or a sea-doo or a pontoon or out there fishing. There you go.
Now, down here, there's a huge lake called Lake Seminole. And three different, the Chattahoochee River and the Flint River, and also the Spring Creek runs into it. And it borders on Florida, Alabama, and a lot of it mostly is in Georgia. Went down to the lake and looked all in it and put the boat in and went to go floating, and there's hydrilla that are so thick in the lake that you can't start a motor and drive to it. It's so thick. And it's a great big huge lake. So you can paddle to it, but it's really difficult. And this stuff is just thick. It's just not just a little bit. So there are some lakes down here that are beautiful to look at. You can't swim in them. You can't go and, off your property and down in your yard and go swimming because the hydrilla is so thick it'll get tangled around your legs.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, but anyway, so what used to be really popular around here, now further north in Georgia where the water's colder and stuff, but down here over the many years, the hydrilla has just taken over the local lakes. And it's a shame because they're pretty. I'd like to go motorboating around a little bit, and this stuff is nasty. You can't go 10 feet and you've got this stuff wrapped around your prop. So anyway, onward and upward. I pulled 4 cards this week. I tried to push a 5th and they said, nah. Whoops. Whoa. I kind of just had everything sitting here. Come on, hold still.
Hold still.
So the first card up tonight is Old Whale. Number 41 in the book, and it's, as we know, Whale is record keeping. And I think we had Whale not too long ago, fairly recently.
Oh, yeah. Recently.
Whale is very much like a swimming library. And Whale carries the history of Mother Earth and is said to have been placed here by the ancients from the dog star of Sirius, which, by the way, if anywhere you live in, go outside and look to the south, because Sirius is the red star, the dog star, and it's in the constellation of Scorpio, and it's south and up, and it looks like a big Y in the sky, but it's out there. So biologists say the whale is a mammal and very possibly lived on land millions of years ago. In tribal legend, whales' move into the oceans happened when the earth shifted and Lemuria, the motherland, went below the waves. Now, there's a lot of talk about crustal shift coming in about a year. And ladies and gentlemen, the theory behind that stuff with the North Pole and the South Pole and the ice moving and stuff, it ain't gonna happen. Okay. All of our petroglyphs.
It's gonna happen. That's gonna happen. Oh,
No.
man. Looking forward to that.
Nope. Now, for folks who know, I've been talking about the Earth wobble for a long time. But there's too much weight on the bottom of the planet for it to flip up too far because it's like a weeble. There's more weight on the bottom, just like a tackling dummy, just like a punching bag dummy. You hit it and it bounces back. The Earth is like that. The amount of ice that's down there, the amount of water that's down there, because there's a bunch of water and it weighs a lot down there in the Pacific and it's really deep. So the idea that we could just flip up and Einstein was wrong on the mathematics, by the way, but there are a lot of folks that they're convinced that in less than 2 years it's gonna happen. But me and a bunch of other physicists don't believe so. So please don't worry. Whale saw the events that led to the settling of Turtle Island of North America and has kept the records and the knowledge of the motherland. Kept it alive, and it is said that Mu will rise again when fire comes from the sky and lands in another ocean on Mother Earth. Now, we might be looking at that catastrophic event. The native medicine people are waiting for this event as the next sign of Earth changes. Interesting, I picked the whale card, and because we're all in this time of folks talking about the end of the world and everything, but it's Earth changes. Earth's children will have to unite and honor all the ways and all the races in order to survive. Now, that's just good medicine, because there are a lot of folks who just want to argue and fight with anybody. So whale medicine people are coded in their DNA to understand that sound frequencies can bring up records in the memories of ancient knowledge. They are usually clairaudient or able to hear both very low and very high frequencies. Many times, however, they are not awakened to these gifts until it is time to use the stored records. Many whale medicine people are able to tap into the universal mind of the Great Spirit. So one of the messages of this is to use the whale medicine to tap in to the mind of the universal mind of the Great Spirit. If you've pulled the whale card, you are being asked to tap into these records and to allow yourself to be sung to by those who have the original knowledge. And so, I've listened to a lot of people here recently, and they're all talking about how you should sit quietly. And folks who have remote viewings getting more popular with a lot of people. And so, shout out to Max out there. And so with that said, so that if you learn to sit quietly and so forth, you can see the Akashic record, you can use and remote view to places and things and stuff. So allow your voice to use the sound in your own, within yourself. Use that sound. Whale signals a time of finding your origins, of seeing your overall destiny as coded in your DNA. You may never know, you may never be the same if you find that sense and that frequency. After all, you are the melody of the universe. Remember that. You are the melody of the universe. And the harmony is the song of the other creatures. And using your voice to open your memory, you are expressing your uniqueness and your personal sound. After all, you are the melody of the universe. Remember that. And the harmony is the song of all the other creatures. That's good medicine. Now, the next one is upside down, number 13. and it's Coyote. Ooh, that trickster. And we know that's just exactly what he is a trickster. Yep, that's what it says in the book too. He's a trickster. There are thousands of myths and stories about Coyote, the great trickster. Many native culture calls Coyote the medicine dog. If you pulled this card, you can be sure that some kind of medicine is on its way. So we just had Whale, who's, look into the records and find your own frequency. And here's Coyote coming along going to trick you into something, or try to. Whatever the medicine is, good or bad, you can be sure it will make you laugh, maybe even painfully. You can also be sure that Coyote will teach you a lesson about yourself. So Akashic Record, think about, find your own frequency and find your own Akashic Record. Find out, what's in it for you. Now, here's Coyote that's about the same thing, who says, will teach you a lesson about yourself. Coyote has many magical powers, but they do not always work in his favor. His own trickery fools him. He is the master trickster who tricks himself. No one is more astonished than the Coyote at the outcome of his own tricks. He falls into his own trap, and yet he somehow manages to survive, and that's the key. No matter what happens to Coyote and Roadrunner, Coyote always limps into the next frame, He always makes it. He may be banged and bruised by the experience, but he soon goes on his way to even greater error. Another thing from Acme. Forgetting to learn from his mistakes. He may have lost the battle, but he's never beaten. Now the card's upside down, so we got to go to that contrary part. If Coyote appears in the reverse position, you can be assured that he is going to be contrary and a pain in your side. Look around yourself and watch which direction Coyote may be coming from. If Coyote is approaching you from the outside, beware of the master of illusion. Coyote may put you in his spell and take you to a briar patch to pick berries. It will be a painful lesson for you if you follow him. Coyote Reverse can appear in your life as a supposed all-knowing teacher, a scam artist, a get-rich-quick business planner, a rare coin door-to-door salesperson, a femme fatale, a politician, a land realtor, or anybody who wants you to follow their lead. Coyote is not the recommended business partner or a lover. And Whale just said to go into your record and look to see what's there. And Coyote's coming along and going, hey, there might be trouble around the corner. So the next card in line is Porcupine, number 12. And Porcupine is innocence. And so Porcupine remind me of innocence again. With every man a brother, each woman a friend. The south of the medicine wheel is a place of childlike innocence and humility. So now we've got Whale that says sing a song and to bring it into your life. And Coyote's like, be careful. And the porcupine is the home of playfulness. Porcupine has many special qualities and a very powerful medicine, the power of faith and trust. So coming up, look into your Akashic record, be aware of Coyote, but now we need to learn how to take this medicine, the power of faith and trust. The power of faith contains within it the ability to move mountains. The power of trust in life involves trusting that the Great Spirit has a divine plan. Keep that in mind always. And that ties into whale. So, if you were to observe porcupine, you would immediately notice its quills. These quills are only used when trust has been broken between porcupine and another creature. Much like otter, porcupine is a gentle, loving creature and non-aggressive. When fear is not present, it is possible to feed a porcupine by hand. Porcupine, through understanding the basic nature of this animal, you may come to understand your own need for trust and faith. And we're going to need a lot of that in the future with just our fellow man. In choosing the porcupine card, you have given yourself a gentle reminder to not get caught in the chaos of the adult world where fear and greed and suffering are the commonplace. The medicine in this card is that of relief from seriousness and severity. Open your heart to those things that give you joy as a child. Remember the preciousness of fantasy and imagination and the making of some game or toy from nothing but scraps. Honor the playfulness of spirit that lets everyone win. So we got one more card here. I hope this is making sense to anybody, but it kind of does to me because, there's a lot of chaos and way too many people being way too serious. And the next card in is Weasel, number 33, upside down. Weasel is stealth. Weasel has an incredible amount of energy and ingenuity, yet it is a difficult power totem to have. It is not without the significance that ermine or weasel pelt is worn by royalty, because weasel ears hear what is really being said. This is a great ability, and weasel eyes see beneath the surface of a situation to know the many ramifications of an event. This too is a rare gift. So with Weasel being upside down, it says if he's in upside down, if so, look out for intrigue. Someone may be using covert tactics to weasel into your hen house. Perhaps you should lock your doors and dress your teenager like a nun. Or perhaps you may be lying to yourself about something you know to be true. This can be a lie on any level. For instance, taking pie in the middle of the night. Another message of reverse weasel is to acknowledge why you have been doubting your feelings. Weasel upright observes all actions, feelings, and situations with keen senses. In the contrary, which this is, those abilities of observations are dulled until confusion sets in. So, Whale is saying go into your Akashic record and hear and listen, and to make your own noise. And the second card out is Coyote, which is kind of, be aware because you're going to learn some lessons that could be painful along the way. And my third card was Porcupine, which reminds us to keep joy and innocence in our lives, which is always important with all the chaos going on. And that, and Weasel says, here we go. Have you been doubting your feelings, and keep an eye on all of your actions and stuff. And don't doubt those things that are going on around you, stay out of the chaos. So be aware and stay out of the mess. Man, have a, Keep joyfulness in your heart. That's not a bad message. Well, always be aware. Find your own harmony. A lot of stuff we've been listening to recently, and I mean the last 6 months to a year, is all about frequency, you know? And so here's whale right off the bat, frequency. You know, listen to that whale song and find your own frequency and your own sound and, you know, and make a little noise. And
Mhm.
listen to a special the other day, and they were talking about frequency and the sound of Om. Om. Just
Oh,
how important, we say, oh yeah, all them monks sit around, yeah, okay. But no, that actually the frequency itself, they have found to have some very interesting properties to it. So, here Whale is talking about finding frequency. So there y'all go. And you don't have to go anywhere to do it. You know what I mean? You just sit at home. Man, it's hot down here. Ooh, wait, and I'm
not
just,
here.
I'm just sweating. It's the humidity. It's
It
like
is.
79 degrees and 98% humidity. It's summertime in Georgia. It ain't no big deal.
It's
But it's
59 here. 59. I'll send you some of the cool air.
I'll take it. Well, we've had a really good spring up to now, so I really can't complain. But right now, it's summertime. Holy mackerel, it's summertime. Ooh, wee.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I thank everybody for putting up tonight and listening to the story. And let me, pull the cards and give you all a little advice. And as always, Robert, I thank you for having me on every Tuesday. We missed last week because Mr. Robert had to work. But it's always a pleasure to come out here and share the time with you and the folks that come out and share their time with us. So thank you, y'all, and stay safe.
That's right. That's right. I do what I can and I work. So, somebody's got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And when work comes calling, you got to do your thing. And sorry about that, but it doesn't happen very often. But when it does, it does. And we just make the best of it. But don't worry, we'll be back on Saturday. I'll be back. I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but I got to have some show big planned. It'll be a good one. This last one was pretty darn good. We were talking about the black sun. We had Grandpa Brian on. We talked about the black sun. And what does that mean? Ooh, it was one of the better shows, So it was really cool. What does the black sun mean? So if you didn't watch it, go back and watch it. And don't worry, I'm gonna try to give you all a good one for this week. Maybe a teaser on Friday or something. We'll have to do a news show because the Biden and Trump debate is on Thursday, so we'll have to.
Oh, goodness gracious!
We'll have to poke fun at that. Maybe Mr. Poopy Pants will poop in his pants on stage. That'll be something to talk about for ages.
And it's an hour and a half, and nobody's allowed in there. So just as an observation, all Trump's got to do is just stand there. Yeah, all he's got to do is just stand there. He doesn't have to say anything and just let Biden. And all he's got to do is just stand there and point.
Well, the thing is about these people, and I don't want to pick on people in general or old people, but you do know that when an old person who has dementia and you start getting them mad or angry or making them think harder, they tend to kind of freak out because they're out of their little zone, and then all of a sudden nothing works right. So that's all I can say.
Right.
You know?
And this recently, he was right in the middle of a sentence and just kind of lost it. He was like, everybody is going to be okay with some okay. And everybody just kind of looked at him, you know. And so, and a couple of those is going to frustrate him. And it's going to be interesting to see, you know, how this works out. Whether or not he blows a gasket, as some
Well,
people have said, whether or not the robot loses its temper.
and that's true. You know, it's like I watched. I don't know if you guys watch Elizabeth April, but she says, you know, they'll replace the clone they got him cloned several times over, and they'll break out the new clone for the debate. And I'm like, yeah, oh, okay, I don't know, but some people say, well, they'll drug him up really good, and he'll be more cognitive than ever. And I'm thinking,
Yeah, that's what Trump said in when he was in Wisconsin, I think, or up there. Anyway, um, or maybe it was Minnesota. I can't remember. But anyway, I was listening to his speech because I wanted to hear what he had to say, and I didn't want anybody else to say, well, I heard Trump said, nah, I listened. So, but anyway, he was like, he's like, they are gonna have him so pumped up. When they push him out there, and everybody laughed, and it's like, yeah, buddy, it's gonna be, especially for 90 minutes. I thought that's a little long, but if it's gonna be live, who's gonna come out and save him? Is he got an earpiece? Is he listening? I mean, Trump don't need no notes, and so just from a standpoint of having been in debates back in the day, this is going to be funny. I just going to see how this goes.
Yeah, Scotty Boy says I listen to EA. He loves EA. I hope you listen to the one about the Trump Biden thing. And hey, give me a shout out. Let me know what you thought of her show about Trump thing. But anyway, yeah, that's true. So will he poop on stage? Mr. Poopy Pants poop on stage? Will he break down? Will he be so energized that he will look like a 20-year-old guy up there, talking?
The Energizer Bunny, and you'll be able to tell because his eyes will be like this.
Yeah.
They'll be real wide, and but at the same time, having been around drug addicts over the years, when they get like that, but they're also easy to tick off. They're easily triggered, and so there is that dementia thing that when they get frustrated, folks have a tendency to get a little, upset. But then if they're on some kind of steroid kind of thing, that's going to make them really mean too. And they were talking about that today. They said, recently he's just, he hasn't just gotten angry, he's gotten mean. And so folks are going to be going, it's one thing to be angry, but is he being mean about it?
Yeah.
So it's going to be fun. I can't wait.
Yep. Okay. Well, you got a show after this tonight?
Yeah, probably. I'm
right.
all wound up and ready to go now.
All right. Well, you're going wound up, and I'm going to bed. I got to go to work tomorrow, and that's the way it works. So, but anyway, everybody, thank you all for joining us tonight. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you, Chloe, Scotty Boy, Karen, Elderberry, Lucky Stone, everybody joining, Nina, all the people. And who is here? Tales Told in the Dark. There you go. Thank you, everyone who joined us tonight. It's been a lot of fun. And if you watch this on the flip side, so thank you all for watching this later. And with that, thank you, David, for being on and
be safe.
Being patient with me from last week because it was kind of like, oh crap, I ain't gonna make it. So be the frequency you want to receive, everybody. Love you all. Peace, everybody.
Cheers.